Power is not given, it is taken. Unknown. Most people believe life is about working harder. They think more hours equals more success. They grind, they hustle, they burn out. This is a comforting lie. It allows them to feel virtuous while remaining stuck. The truth is success isn't about effort, it's about geometry. It's about positioning yourself in a system to create a geometric advantage. Imagine a lever. A small input becomes a massive output, not because the person pushing is strong, but because of the placement of the fulcrum. Strategic placement amplifies force. It's the difference between pushing a car and driving it. One is brute force, the other is harnessing a system. The first path leads to exhaustion, the second to acceleration. The myth of hard work is perpetuated because it's a convenient narrative for those already at an advantage. They can preach grit and determination while conveniently ignoring the structural advantages that paved their way. They climbed a ladder others couldn't even see. They had access to resources, networks, and opportunities unavailable to the masses. Telling everyone to simply work harder deflects attention from the real game, the game of systemic advantage. It keeps the playing field tilted in their favor. Don't fall for it. See the hidden geometry. Understand that the battlefield isn't flat. It's a complex terrain of power dynamics, social capital, and strategic opportunities. Consider a chessboard. Each piece has inherent limitations, but its power is derived from its position relative to other pieces. A pawn on the second rank is a weakling. A pawn on the seventh rank is a threat, on the verge of promotion. The piece hasn't changed, but its geometric position has transformed its potential. Similarly, in life, your skills and talents are like chess pieces. They have inherent value, but their true potential is unlocked by strategically positioning yourself within the larger game. Are you on the offensive? Are you controlling key squares? Are you setting up a checkmate? Losers focus on individual moves. Winners see the board. They understand the interconnectedness of pieces and the strategic importance of space. They don't just react to immediate threats, they anticipate future possibilities. They calculate trajectories and leverage geometry to gain an insurmountable advantage. The long game isn't about who works the hardest, it's about who sees the furthest. It's about understanding that every action creates a ripple effect, altering the geometry of the board and shifting the balance of power. The emotional response to this truth is often resistance. It's easier to cling to the comforting narrative of hard work than to confront the uncomfortable reality of systemic inequality and strategic maneuvering. Acknowledging the geometry of advantage means admitting that the game isn't fair, that effort alone is not enough. This realization can be demoralizing, but it can also be empowering. Because once you understand the rules of the game, you can begin to play it differently. You can stop blindly pushing against the system and start strategically navigating it. You can learn to identify and exploit geometric advantages, to leverage your resources, and to build your own systems of power. Don't be a pawn blindly following orders. Become a player who understands the board, who anticipates the moves, and who calculates the path to victory. See the geometry, and you will see the game. The psychology of advantage isn't about innate talent. It's about cultivated awareness. It's about training your mind to see beyond the surface, to recognize the hidden patterns and subtle connections that shape the outcome. It's about developing the mental fortitude to delay gratification, to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term dominance. The ability to think strategically is a skill, not a gift. It can be learned, practiced, and honed through relentless analysis and disciplined execution. Many are unwilling to make the necessary sacrifices. They prioritize immediate comfort over future security, instant gratification over enduring achievement. They are trapped in a cycle of reactivity, constantly responding to the demands of the moment without ever stepping back to assess the overall situation. They are slaves to their emotions, allowing fear and anxiety to cloud their judgment and sabotage their efforts. True strategic thinking requires a degree of emotional detachment, a willingness to make difficult decisions based on cold, rational analysis. It demands the courage to ignore the noise of the crowd and to trust your own calculations, even when they run counter to conventional wisdom. The discomfort of acknowledging geometric advantage stems from a deeply ingrained belief in meritocracy. The idea that success is solely determined by hard work and talent is a comforting illusion, one that shields us from the harsh realities of power dynamics and systemic inequalities. But clinging to this illusion is a dangerous game. It blinds us to the opportunities that exist within the system and prevents us from effectively navigating the landscape. Recognizing the role of geometry in shaping outcomes is not an admission of defeat. It's an act of empowerment. It's a recognition that the game is rigged and that the only way to win is to understand the rules and play accordingly. The question then becomes, how do you cultivate this strategic mindset? How do you train your mind to see the geometry of advantage and to exploit it for your own benefit? The answer lies in a combination of knowledge, discipline, and relentless self-reflection. First, you must acquire a deep understanding of the underlying systems and power structures that govern your chosen domain. You must study the history of the game, analyze the strategies of past masters, and identify the patterns that consistently lead to success. Second, you must cultivate the discipline to consistently apply this knowledge in your own actions. You must learn to delay gratification, to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term objectives, and to resist the temptation to react emotionally to setbacks and challenges. Finally, you must engage in relentless self-reflection, constantly evaluating your performance and identifying areas for improvement. You must be willing to confront your own biases and limitations, to challenge your assumptions, and to adapt your strategies as the game evolves. This process of continuous learning and adaptation is essential for maintaining a strategic edge in a dynamic and unpredictable world. The geometry of advantage is not a static concept. It is a constantly shifting landscape. Those who fail to adapt will inevitably be left behind, while those who embrace change and continually refine their strategies will continue to thrive. The mastery of strategic thinking is a lifelong pursuit, a journey of continuous learning and refinement. It requires a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom, to embrace discomfort, and to see the world through a different lens. But the rewards are immense. Those who cultivate this mindset will not only achieve greater success in their chosen fields, but they will also gain a deeper understanding of the world around them and their place within it. They will become architects of their own destiny, shaping their future with intention and purpose, rather than being passively swept along by the currents of fate. This understanding provides the agency to shape your path. The trap for the weak is a failure of perspective. It is a myopic focus on immediate circumstances, an inability to see the broader implications of their actions, a fundamental misunderstanding of cause and effect. They are trapped by their own limited vision, blinded by the immediate present, unable to anticipate the consequences of their choices. This narrow perspective manifests in several predictable ways. Firstly, they prioritize immediate gratification over long-term benefits. They are seduced by fleeting pleasures and instant rewards, sacrificing their future well-being for momentary satisfaction. They lack the discipline to delay gratification, to endure short-term discomfort for long-term gain. This pattern of behavior leads to a cycle of dependence on external validation and fleeting satisfaction, leaving them perpetually vulnerable and unfulfilled. Secondly, they react emotionally to events rather than responding strategically. They are driven by fear, anger, and anxiety, making impulsive decisions that undermine their long-term interests. They allow their emotions to cloud their judgment, blinding them to rational analysis and strategic planning. This emotional reactivity makes them predictable and easily manipulated, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation by those with cooler heads and clearer vision. Thirdly, they fail to learn from their mistakes. They repeat the same errors, trapped in a cycle of self-defeating behavior. They lack the self-awareness to recognize their shortcomings, the humility to acknowledge their failures, and the discipline to implement corrective measures. This inability to learn from experience condemns them to repeat the same mistakes, perpetuating their disadvantage. Furthermore, the weak are often characterized by a lack of self-awareness. They are unable to accurately assess their own strengths and weaknesses, to understand their own biases and limitations. This lack of self-awareness leads to overconfidence in their abilities and a tendency to overestimate their chances of success. They take on challenges they are not equipped to handle, make commitments they cannot fulfill, and ultimately set themselves up for failure. Conversely, they may also suffer from crippling self-doubt and insecurity, underestimating their potential and shying away from opportunities for growth and advancement. This lack of self-belief prevents them from taking risks, from pursuing their goals with conviction, and from realizing their full potential. They are trapped by their own negative self-image, unable to break free from the limitations they impose upon themselves. Another critical weakness lies in their inability to adapt to changing circumstances. The world is a dynamic and unpredictable place, and those who cling rigidly to outdated strategies and inflexible beliefs are destined to be left behind. The weak are resistant to change, clinging to familiar routines and comfortable assumptions. They are unable to adapt to new information, to adjust their plans in response to unforeseen events, or to embrace new technologies and approaches. This inflexibility makes them vulnerable to disruption, obsolescence, and ultimately, failure. They are like rigid trees in a storm, unable to bend with the wind and inevitably uprooted by the force of nature. Finally, the weak often suffer from a lack of resilience. They are easily discouraged by setbacks and challenges, quickly giving up when faced with adversity. They lack the grit and determination to persevere through difficult times, to learn from their failures and to bounce back stronger than before. This lack of resilience makes them vulnerable to discouragement, depression, and ultimately, despair. They are unable to overcome obstacles, to navigate challenges, and to achieve their goals in the face of adversity. They are like fragile flowers, easily crushed by the weight of the world. Overcoming these weaknesses requires a conscious and deliberate effort to cultivate a more strategic mindset. It requires a willingness to challenge your own assumptions, to confront your own biases, and to embrace the discomfort of change. It requires a commitment to lifelong learning, to continuous self-improvement, and to the relentless pursuit of excellence. It is a difficult and demanding path, but it is the only path to lasting success. The alternative is to remain trapped in a cycle of weakness and failure, a victim of your own limited perspective. The geometry of advantage demands that you transcend these limitations, to see the world with clarity and insight, and to act with intention and purpose. The Machiavellian approach to the geometry of advantage recognizes that the world is not a level playing field. Some players are simply better positioned than others, and success often depends on exploiting these positional advantages. This requires a cold, calculating assessment of the landscape, a willingness to manipulate the rules of the game, and an unwavering focus on achieving your goals, regardless of the cost. It's about understanding power dynamics, anticipating your opponent's moves, and ruthlessly exploiting their weaknesses. The Machiavellian strategist sees the world as a chessboard, where every piece has a specific value and every move has a consequence. They are not bound by morality or ethics, but rather by a pragmatic assessment of what is necessary to win. This doesn't necessarily imply blatant dishonesty or cruelty, but rather a willingness to bend the rules, to deceive when necessary, and to prioritize self-interest above all else. A key element of this approach is cultivating a reputation for being unpredictable and ruthless. This can deter potential adversaries and create opportunities for exploitation. By keeping your intentions hidden and your actions unpredictable, you can keep your opponents off balance and make them more vulnerable to your strategic maneuvers. This also means being willing to betray allies when necessary, to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term advantages, and to always be prepared to adapt to changing circumstances. The Machiavellian strategist understands that trust is a liability and that loyalty is a weakness to be exploited. He understands the power of leverage, knowing how to exploit the vulnerabilities of others to gain positional advantage. Cultivating an aura of power is also crucial. This can be achieved through a combination of charisma, intelligence, and a reputation for success. People are naturally drawn to power, and they are more likely to cooperate with those who exude it. This means projecting confidence, decisiveness, and a willingness to take risks. It also means surrounding yourself with competent and loyal advisors who can help you to navigate the complexities of the game. The Machiavellian approach also involves a deep understanding of human psychology. This includes recognizing the common biases and irrationalities that drive human behavior and exploiting them for your own advantage. For example, people are often more motivated by fear than by reward, so a Machiavellian strategist may use threats and intimidation to achieve their goals. Similarly, people are often susceptible to flattery and manipulation, so a Machiavellian strategist may use these techniques to gain their trust and influence their decisions. The long game is essential, so focus on building systems to perpetuate your success. Furthermore, the Machiavellian approach recognizes the importance of controlling information. Information is power, and those who control the flow of information can shape the perceptions and behaviors of others. This means actively seeking out information, protecting your own secrets, and disseminating misinformation when necessary to mislead your opponents. It also means controlling the narrative, shaping public opinion to your advantage, and discrediting those who oppose you. To effectively manage the control of information, one must act with the precision of a calculating machine. Emotions have no place in the world of intelligence. The capacity to act decisively is also a core principle. Hesitation and indecision can be fatal in a competitive environment. A Machiavellian strategist must be willing to make tough decisions quickly and decisively, even when faced with incomplete information. This requires a strong sense of self-belief, a willingness to take risks, and an ability to learn from your mistakes. It also requires the ability to delegate effectively, trusting your advisors to execute your plans and to provide you with accurate information. However, decisiveness alone is not enough. The Machiavellian strategist must also be adaptable, willing to change course when necessary and to adjust their strategies in response to changing circumstances. Rigidity and inflexibility are weaknesses that can be exploited by your opponents. Adaptability requires a willingness to learn, to experiment, and to embrace new ideas. It also requires the ability to think critically, to challenge your own assumptions, and to see the world from multiple perspectives. The Machiavellian approach also involves a deep understanding of the art of negotiation. This includes knowing when to compromise, when to stand your ground, and when to walk away from a deal. It also means being able to read your opponent, to understand their motivations and their weaknesses, and to use this knowledge to your advantage. Negotiation is not about being nice or fair, but about achieving your goals in the most efficient and effective way possible. In essence, the Machiavellian approach to the geometry of advantage is a ruthless and pragmatic philosophy that prioritizes success above all else. It requires a cold, calculating mindset, a willingness to manipulate the rules of the game, and an unwavering focus on achieving your goals, regardless of the cost. It is not a philosophy for the faint of heart, but it is a philosophy that has been used by some of the most successful leaders and strategists in history. A key tenet of the Machiavellian view is a profound understanding of the zero-sum nature of many interactions. In a zero-sum game, one person's gain is another person's loss. The Machiavellian strategist recognizes that resources are often finite, and that success often comes at the expense of others. This requires a competitive mindset, a willingness to fight for your share of the pie, and an ability to outmaneuver your rivals. It also means being willing to take risks, to push the boundaries of what is acceptable, and to exploit every possible advantage. The concept of honor or fair play is not a consideration in this view. They are only useful constructs if they can be weaponized to gain an edge against others. Maintaining a healthy level of paranoia is also crucial for navigating the complexities and dangers of the competitive landscape. A Machiavellian strategist understands that trust is a luxury that they cannot afford. They are constantly on guard, suspicious of the motives of others, and always prepared for betrayal. This requires a network of informants, a robust security system, and a willingness to use surveillance to monitor your rivals. It also means being careful about who you trust, limiting your exposure to potential threats, and always having a backup plan in case things go wrong. By maintaining a healthy level of paranoia, you can anticipate potential dangers, avoid traps, and protect yourself from harm. The world is filled with those who will seek to take advantage of any weakness. The Machiavellian approach also emphasizes the importance of appearances. People are often judged by their appearance, and a Machiavellian strategist understands the power of projecting an image of strength, competence, and success. This means dressing well, speaking confidently, and surrounding yourself with symbols of power and status. It also means controlling your emotions, avoiding displays of weakness, and always maintaining a composed and professional demeanor. By projecting a positive image, you can influence the perceptions of others, attract allies, and deter potential adversaries. This image crafting is not about vanity, but about strategic advantage. It is about controlling the narrative and shaping the perceptions of others to your benefit. It is a calculated move designed to maximize your influence and minimize your vulnerability. Moreover, the Machiavellian approach necessitates a comprehensive understanding of systemic vulnerabilities. To exploit weaknesses effectively, one must first identify them. This requires a deep analysis of the systems, structures, and relationships that govern the competitive landscape. It means understanding the points of failure, the areas of inefficiency, and the sources of instability. It also means recognizing the biases and limitations of the individuals and organizations that operate within these systems. By identifying these vulnerabilities, you can develop targeted strategies to exploit them, disrupt the status quo, and gain a decisive advantage. This strategic exploitation requires a combination of intelligence, creativity, and ruthlessness. It means thinking outside the box, challenging conventional wisdom, and being willing to take risks that others are not. It also means being prepared to face resistance, to overcome obstacles, and to adapt to changing circumstances. The ultimate goal is to create a systemic advantage that is difficult for your rivals to replicate. Finally, the Machiavellian strategist must possess the discipline to execute their plans with precision and consistency. Strategic thinking is not enough. You must also have the ability to implement your ideas effectively, to manage your resources efficiently, and to motivate your team to achieve their goals. This requires strong leadership skills, a clear vision, and a relentless focus on execution. It also means being willing to make tough decisions, to hold people accountable, and to reward success. The Machiavellian approach is not for the faint of heart, but it is a powerful framework for achieving your goals in a competitive and unforgiving world. Remember that any momentary lapse in judgment is an opportunity for others to take advantage. The Roman Empire offers a profound case study in the geometry of advantage. Its expansion wasn't merely about brute force. It was about systematically identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities in its adversaries, geopolitical positions, and internal structures. Consider the Punic Wars. Rome understood that Carthage, a maritime power, relied heavily on its naval dominance and control of trade routes. Rather than directly confronting the Carthaginian navy head-on in initial engagements, Rome focused on building its own fleet, learning from captured Carthaginian vessels, and developing tactics that could neutralize Carthage's naval advantage. This strategic shift wasn't just about shipbuilding. It was about understanding the geometric advantage that naval power gave Carthage, and then dismantling it through a calculated application of resources and innovative thinking. Rome understood that controlling the sea was a key choke point in the conflict. This long-term vision paid off, as Rome was eventually able to strangle Carthaginian trade, weaken its economy, and ultimately defeat it in its own territories. This pattern of strategic calculation wasn't limited to naval warfare. In its land campaigns, Rome consistently sought to exploit geographical features and logistical weaknesses. Roman engineers were masters of building roads, bridges, and fortifications, which allowed Roman armies to move quickly, supply themselves efficiently, and secure conquered territories. These infrastructure projects weren't just about convenience. They were about creating a network of control that gave Rome a geometric advantage over its more dispersed and less organized enemies. The Roman road system became a nervous system for the empire, allowing for the rapid deployment of troops, the efficient transport of goods, and the swift communication of orders. The Roman approach also extended to internal political maneuvering. Rome was adept at exploiting divisions among its enemies, playing different factions against each other, and offering incentives for cooperation. This strategy of divide and conquer wasn't just about treachery. It was about understanding the underlying power dynamics of a region, and then using that knowledge to manipulate events to Rome's advantage. By fostering internal conflicts and offering alliances to weaker factions, Rome could weaken its enemies from within, making them easier to conquer and control. The Roman system of client states was a particularly effective example of this strategy, as it allowed Rome to extend its influence and control without having to commit large numbers of troops or resources. Furthermore, the Roman military was structured to capitalize on its advantages. The legionary system, with its emphasis on discipline, training, and standardization, allowed Roman armies to fight effectively in a variety of terrains and against a variety of opponents. The Roman military wasn't just about individual bravery. It was about creating a fighting force that was greater than the sum of its parts, a force that could consistently outmaneuver and outfight its enemies. The Roman emphasis on logistics and engineering also gave its armies a significant advantage, allowing them to operate for extended periods of time in hostile environments. The Roman example demonstrates that the geometry of advantage is not just about physical space. It's also about understanding the underlying systems and power dynamics that shape events. It's about identifying vulnerabilities, exploiting weaknesses, and creating a network of control that gives you a decisive edge. It's about thinking strategically, acting decisively, and always being one step ahead of your rivals. It also means understanding that the sources of advantage can change over time, and that you must be constantly adapting your strategies to maintain your edge. Complacency and arrogance are the enemies of strategic thinking, and they can quickly lead to downfall. The Roman Empire eventually declined and fell, in part because it became complacent and failed to adapt to changing circumstances. It grew too confident in its own power and failed to recognize the growing threats on its borders and the internal weaknesses that were undermining its stability. The lesson of Rome is clear. Strategic thinking is a continuous process, not a one-time event. You must always be learning, adapting, and seeking new ways to gain an advantage. To truly master the geometry of advantage, you must understand that it's not just about tactics on a battlefield or moves on a chessboard. It's about shaping the very landscape of the game to your benefit. It's about understanding the psychology of your opponents, anticipating their moves, and manipulating their perceptions to your advantage. Consider the concept of framing and negotiation. By controlling the narrative, you can influence how others perceive the situation and what outcomes they consider acceptable. This is a form of geometric control, shaping the mental space in which decisions are made. Strategic advantage also involves understanding the power of information. In the modern world, data is the new battlefield, and those who can gather, analyze, and interpret information effectively will have a significant edge. This means investing in intelligence gathering, developing sophisticated analytical tools, and cultivating a network of reliable sources. It also means protecting your own information from your rivals, using encryption, counterintelligence, and other security measures to maintain your competitive advantage. The geometry of advantage also extends to the realm of alliances and partnerships. By forming strategic alliances, you can pool resources, share risks, and gain access to new markets and technologies. However, it's important to choose your allies carefully and to always be aware of their motives and potential for betrayal. Alliances are not always permanent, and you must be prepared to adapt your strategy if circumstances change. Ultimately, the geometry of advantage is about creating a self-reinforcing system, a virtuous cycle that generates momentum and makes your success inevitable. This requires a long-term perspective, a willingness to invest in the future, and a commitment to continuous improvement. It also requires a degree of ruthlessness, a willingness to make difficult decisions and to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term strategic advantage. Remember, the game is not about playing fair, it's about winning. It is about understanding the underlying architecture of power, manipulating the variables, and bending reality to your